welcome to the Planning Committee. The first item on our agenda, any apologies for absence?
Councillor Mark Chine.
From Mark, okay. No others? No. Okay. Disclosures, second item, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests, anyone? Councillor White?
Yes, Chair. Personal interest in item 2 and 3, the Havant Copperworks ward member, also a member of the Havant and Morval Copperworks Friends Group. Personal interest, thank you.
Thank you. No others? Nope. Okay, then item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting. So you'll find that on pages 1 to 4. Page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. If somebody move as a true record, please. Thank you. Then any items for deferral or withdrawal? No, Chair. There are none. Good. Okay, then the next item, which is item 5, is the application to add footpaths to the definitive map at Hazel Court in Sketty. Crystal Seals, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. The report considers an application made to the authority to make a modification order to add footpaths to the definitive map in Sketty Park. On the 18th of February 2011, an application was received to record the 3 public footpaths shown on the screen. The application was submitted with 40 supporting evidence forms from witnesses, and a summary of this evidence is in Appendix 4 on page 28, 2021. When the adopted highways records were checked, they showed that the claimed routes between D and E and A and B on the map were already highways. So we only need to consider the routes between B and C and B and E. The original buildings on the site were demolished in 2005 and the site was fenced off. So public use of the routes was interrupted then, and this means that the statutory 20-year period required to prove that they are public footpaths is from 1985 to 2005. As you can see on the photos in Appendix 1 on page 14, the route B to C is fully accessible to the public, walking between Glenravan Gardens and Maesy Gochlin, and has been since June 2009 when the new development was completed. However, the route B to E has been blocked since approximately 2007 by the new development. The aerial photographs from 1981 and 1992 in Appendix 2, which is pages 16 and 17, show the site as it would have been during the statutory 20-year period, so 1985 to 2005. The one on the screen is the 1981 photo, and the next one is the 1992 photo. And as you can see from point B, there's no specific path. You can walk right across this area here, whereas now there is a defined route between C and B. The route between points B and C could have been used at this time, but as the area around the original flats was completely open, people could have walked across a wide area, and no specific route between B and C can be seen from the aerial photos. A specific defined route must be alleged in order to proceed with a modification order to record the route. Of the 40 people submitting evidence, only 3 claim to use the route between B and E, and 12 between B and C. So the conclusion is the case for adding the footpath from point B to C to the definitive map is entirely based on the user evidence provided by the witnesses. Whilst it seems that walkers could easily find their way across the open, mostly grassy site from point B to Mysigochlin during the statutory 20-year period, there was no defined route, and individuals could have arrived at Mysigochlin from numerous different points. The evidence for the route BC is therefore insufficiently precise to enable a modification order to be made. The case for adding the footpath from point B to E to the definitive map is based on the user evidence of only 3 people, and this is considered insufficient to enable a modification order to be made. So the recommendation is the council refuses the application on the grounds that there is insufficient evidence that the claimed routes are public and that one of the footpaths is already adopted as a public highway.
Thank you. Yes, Chris. Councillor Jones.
Question. I've walked that footpath more than 50 years ago. So it's definitely been there. And as you said, we just used to cut across through Hazel Court as it was before. So I'm a little bit, and of course the footpath from Glanravon Gardens down to Mysigochlin wasn't like a public highway. It was just a muddy track. So it was very nice to see it's a public highway. So I can't really understand why we are turning it down, because if we want to have something like legally enforceable, surely we should adopt it. As you said, people will just wander around wherever they want. Wouldn't it be better to have something on a definitive map? I know, as I said, before I got married, I lived around that area and I used that shortcut many, many times. So I thought it'd be better for us to have something in black and white for the future even. Thank you.
Sorry, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. No, in fairness, if the officers are only 3 people, and the operator, as far as I'm concerned, 3 people, it's just a joke. I'm sure they were quite emphatic in what they said, but as I say, if it was 30, 50, 100, you can understand. And as I say, there's plenty of evidence, so I would support the officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Okay then, so there's no other hands up to speak. We can take a vote on the recommendation, which you will see there on page 5, that the council refuses the application on the grounds there's insufficient evidence that the claimed routes are public, and that one of the footpaths anyway is already adopted as public highway. So we can take a vote on that now then, please, Gareth.
Yeah, Councillor Myerbaker. Peter Black. 4. Phil Downing. 4. Alan Jeffrey.
4.
Mary Jones.
Abstain.
Mike Lewis.
4.
Richard Lewis.
4.
Nicola Matthews.
4.
Mike White.
4.
Andrew Williams.
4.
Paul Lloyd.
4.
That's 10 for 1 abstention, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Chris. So we move on to item 6, and it's been agreed that we will deal with item 4 first, which is you'll find on page 115, and that's at Brynterwood. Sorry. Anyway, that's sort you, Elena.
Thank you, Chair. Prananda, good afternoon. Okay, full planning consent is sought for an installation of a battery energy storage system and associated infrastructure and engineering works at land off Brynterwood in Llangyfylach. It's reported to Planning Committee because the site area exceeds 2 hectares. There is an update sheet for this item following the comments of the Fire and Rescue Service. So the recommendation has been amended to that of an approval subject to conditions without the need for any plenary powers. Next slide. Okay. This slide shows the general location of the site in the context of the surrounding area and the wider setting. It's located immediately north of the M4. Next slide, please. This is the counterpart aerial image showing the location of the site and its surroundings. The general vicinity is a mixture of urban and rural features. Next slide, please. So here's a more detailed site location plan together with an aerial image of the immediate area. It comprises approximately 6.75 hectares of agricultural land accessed via Bryn Tywod. To the west lies Tin Masters, an industrial unit, with the proposed access running parallel to the northern boundary of this unit. There is a waste management company to the north and the Avon Llyn, and a railway line runs along the northern boundary. There is common land to the east and the M4 is to the south. The land is within a valley with undulating topography. Whilst the site predominantly consists of grazing fields, it is within the settlement limits of the LDP and lies near but outside the Strategic Development Area SDG, which is for a mixture of uses. The site does include part of 2 sites of interest for nature conservation, or SINCs. And additionally, part of the western sections of the site is located within flood zones B and C2. Extracts of these have been incorporated into the report that's before you today. The site is also within an area known for past coal mining workings as well. Next slide, please. Here's the proposed site plan, as well as the aerial image for the site context purposes. The proposal is essentially for an electricity storage and distribution facility, which is designed to balance the electricity demands and supplies as a result of the intermittent nature of renewable energy sources located nearby. It's to support the flexible operation of the national grid and the decarbonisation of the electricity supply. The development will import and export electricity, but it will not generate any additional electricity as it will be harnessed from existing sources. The proposal primarily comprises of 8 battery storage units and associated transformers and switches, a substation compound with a variety of electrical infrastructure, and a total of 3 containers for storage, welfare and an office, and a customer substation. Boundary treatments and CCTV are also proposed. The submission indicates that the development will have a life expectancy of around 40 years, and following decommissioning, the land will be returned to its current state. Next slide, please. So this slide, I've highlighted 3 areas of the site circled in red, which will contain the battery storage and transformer containers. The structures would be similar to large shipping containers arranged in rows and spaced evenly. Next slide, please. This slide shows the substation compound, again circled in red, which will contain several electricity infrastructure. The upper part of the slide is the elevation view of most of the components in the compound, with the tallest reaching around 9.3 metres in height. The bottom right part of the slide shows the plan view and the layout of the compound. This part of the site would be the nearest to the rear of the Tin Masters industrial unit to the west. Next slide, please. This slide shows 2 areas which will contain the other container type structures as well as fire water storage. Next slide, please. This slide shows the boundary treatments to enclose the sites and CCTV and telecommunications equipment located at various parts of the site. The existing access to the site will be formalised and upgraded to a typical junction arrangement with Bryn Tywod, and this has also been included on the slide. Next slide, please. So the application includes section drawings throughout the site, and 2 are shown on this slide. The top section is a section across the site, generally from north to south, and the bottom section is through the site, generally from east to west. Due to the undulating nature of the site, some engineering works such as cut and fill operations are needed to provide level platforms. The most extensive changes would be land behind the Tin Masters around the proposed substation compound. Next slide, please. So turning to the photographs, here a collection of images around the existing site access and the immediate road of Bryn Tywod. The access will be upgraded to a junction arrangement, as I shown in a couple of slides ago. The bottom image starts to enter the site access lane with the Tin Masters industrial unit on the right. Next slide, please. I've split the site into 6 parcels of land, some of which will follow logical field boundaries. The first parcel is triangular in shape and is located along the access track and nearest to the public road. On the right is the large industrial unit. No significant development would occur here, but it will be enhanced by landscaping and management. Next slide, please. Parcel 2 is the immediate area behind the industrial unit where there's a gentle incline. No significant development will occur here, but it will be enhanced by landscaping and management again. Next slide, please. Parcel 3 would contain most of the battery storage and transformer units. There is a gentle incline since the land continues to rise gradually. Next slide, please. Parcel 4 is the most eastern part of the site, which begins to slope back down. It is intersected by overhead wires from tall electricity pylons. Whilst it's a large field, the plans indicate that less of half of it would be developed to contain further battery storage and transformer containers. The rest of the site would be enhanced by landscaping and management. Next slide, please. So going from Parcel 4 to Parcel 5, you begin at a lower level and then the land gradually rises back up towards the direction of Parcel 6 and the industrial unit. It's a relatively large field which partly sits alongside the tall and strong landscaped embankment of the M4, giving the parcel a bit of a sunken impression. The plans indicate that less than half of it would be developed to contain further battery storage and transformer containers. The rest of the site would be enhanced by landscaping and management. Next slide, please. The final parcel is a relatively elevated position before sloping back down to Parcel 2, which is immediately behind the large industrial unit. Approximately 2/3 of this parcel will be developed to contain the substation compound. As highlighted earlier, the area would require works to the land to create level platforms. However, it will benefit from tree screening and further landscaping, in addition to being alongside the existing industrial unit. Next slide, please. So the main issues to consider in the determination of this application relate to the principle of the development, impacts on visual amenity and residential and general amenity, highway safety and the environment. The application has been subject to publicity, but no representations have been received. Responses from a number of technical consultations have been received, assessed and detailed in the report that is before you today, as well as the update sheet. The report has carefully assessed the key components of the scheme in relation to all planning policies and relevant material planning considerations, some of which I'll now highlight. There is a strong national and local policy framework for supporting development associated with renewable energy and low carbon energy developments, and this proposal seeks to store energy from existing renewable sources in the locality and then to release it in the grid at peak times. Whilst the site largely comprises of grazing field, it is poor quality agricultural land located within the settlement limits of the LDP, so there is scope for landscape change. The application has been supported by a landscape visual assessment. The site is not in any significant or sensitive landscape area, and you will have seen by some of the photographs that the site is surrounded by some physical features, such as the large Tin Masters industrial unit, the man-made embankment of the M4, and various tall electricity pylons around the site. It's also noted that the physical development is carefully placed and spaced out, with many sections to be left undeveloped and enhanced by landscaping and management. No objections have been raised by the Council's landscaping officer, and subject to various conditions, there are no overriding visual amenity concerns. The application site does not contain any significant ecological designations, with the exception of 2 small areas that form part of 2 sites of importance for nature conservation, which are sink. However, equipment would be located outside of the sink areas. A variety of surveys and assessment reports have been submitted in relation to ecology, biodiversity, and matters relating to the natural environment. These have been carefully considered, and in conjunction with consultation responses, there are no objections subject to a raft of conditions. The site is set away from any residential property, with the M4 providing a buffer zone to the nearest properties to the south. Whilst the report acknowledges that there may be a degree of noise and disruption during the construction phase, mainly due to vehicles coming from the south, this is likely to be short-term and can be reasonably managed by conditions. Once operational, the report concludes that the site would not be unduly harmful to residential or general amenity. Access to the site would be upgraded, and the overall development has been considered by the Highway Authority, and following submission of additional information, the Highway Authority have no objections subject to conditions. A small section of the site is at risk of flooding, limited mostly to the access road into the site, being both Zone B and Zone C2. A flood consequences assessment and a drainage strategy have been provided, and in consultation with NRW and the Council's drainage officer. In flooding terms, the development is classed as less vulnerable development. No part of the battery storage or associated electrical infrastructure would be located within any flood zone. NRW, who the Council's technical advisors on flooding, does not consider that there would be an overall risk to flooding, and that the development would not increase the risk of flooding elsewhere either. The technical matters are therefore satisfied. There is, however, some conflict with the justification aspects of TAN 15, and these have been carefully assessed in the report. It must be noted that only part of the access is affected by flooding, and once operational, the site would have limited attendance by workers and the key electrical infrastructure outside the flood zones. The report also gives significant weight to national and local plan policy support for renewable energy infrastructure such as this, whereby Planning Policy Wales states that proposals for new energy storage facilities should be supported wherever possible. The site is subject to past coal mining activity, but the Mining Remediation Authority, which is the coal authority, have no objection subject to conditions. HENEB, who are the Council's archaeological advisors, have no objection subject to condition. The proposal includes fire emergency equipment, including fire water storage tanks, and a safety strategy has been designed. The report before you, including the update sheet, has assessed all matters relating to fire safety, and with the update sheet, there are now no objections by the Fire and Rescue Service. The report concludes that the proposal would support the shift towards a greater reliance on renewable energy and decarbonisation, and the need of such development is recognised by Welsh Government and Planning Policy Wales. This is a significant material consideration in the determination of this application, and the recommendation is as per the update sheet, which is to approve the development subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got two speakers wish to address us. Who's going first? Is it Sam?
Nope, not me.
I'll go first.
I'll go first. Thank
Yeah.
you. When you
Good
got your 5
afternoon.
minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Preeti Yadi, and I'm the Managing Director at FRV PowerTech, the applicant. A brief background about who we are. So FRV was set up in 2006 and one of the pioneers in renewable energy across the globe. So we're currently across 4 continents and have developed and operated more than 50 projects, aggregating to more than 5,000 megawatt. We not only develop projects, but we also own and operate them for the lifetime of the project. In the UK, FRV was one of the early entrants in the battery storage in 2020, and we currently own and operate three battery storage projects, aggregating 280 megawatt hours. A little bit was touched as to why batteries are needed, but I would just like to explain a little bit more as to what happens because of the intermittency of renewable energy. So you could have a situation where energy demand exceeds supply when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing. And at that time, the deficit is balanced through fossil fuels or by importing energy from neighboring countries. The reverse could also happen where energy supply exceeds demand. And what happens is then the government ends up paying curtailment costs to the generators who've been asked to turn down because there's not enough demand in the system. Just last year, the government paid about £1 billion towards curtailment costs. So that is basically telling renewable energy generators to shut off their plants, but they still had to pay them. This was because there was not enough storage capacity in the system to absorb and store the power till when the demand, picks up again. This number is expected to go up to 3 billion by 2030 if enough storage is not on the system. And this ultimately leads to higher energy costs for all of us. Currently, the Clean Power 2030 plan has been announced by the government, and they have broken down technology-wise as to what is going to be required by 2030 in order to decarbonize the grid. And battery storage alone is 27 gigawatts is required by 2030. Currently, we have on the system only 5 gigawatts operational projects. So we still have a long way to go, and there is an urgent need, for us to build more battery projects as more renewables projects get on stream. So batteries, therefore, are a very critical component in the transition towards a clean energy system. As a major global player in the renewable energy sector, FRV ensures that all of its developments have a positive impact on the society and the environment. And we have offered a number of community benefits across our projects. In this case, we also met with the Community Council in October 2024 to discuss the proposed development and potential community benefits. So I'll hand it over to our planning consultant, but happy to answer any questions if needed.
Thank you. My name is Jem Kusana. I'm a town planning director at Lichfields, and I'm the agent for the applicant, FRV. The proposal is seeking planning permission for a battery energy storage system with associated infrastructure and engineering works, and you heard the details from the officer. We welcome the officer's thorough and well-considered report, which recommends that planning permission should be granted. This recommendation is fully supported by us as planning agents and also by the applicant, FRV. FRV has set out the urgent need to support decentralised energy and infrastructure to enable the transition to renewable and low-carbon energy networks. This is one of the highest priorities identified by Welsh Government and is clearly set out in Planning Policy Wales. At the local level, Swansea Council is committed to a £187 million plan to achieve net zero by 2030. The proposed development helps to meet this priority need in accordance with the statutory development plan. It meets the LDP policy tests, and there are no technical or environmental constraints that would justify a refusal. The design has been guided by ecological considerations. As you've heard, it avoids development in the two sink areas, and it avoids removal of any trees of value. The surface water drainage scheme has been informed by pre-application feedback from the SAB authority. The site is well connected to the nearby motorway and A roads, which will provide safe and suitable routes for the limited number of construction vehicles. Key issues, including transport, flood risk, ecology, fire safety, and landscape, have all been thoroughly assessed by experts and scrutinised by statutory consultees and your officers, who all agree that the proposal is acceptable. The applicant has undertaken statutory pre-application consultation. It has engaged with Llangeffelec Community Council and, amongst others, the Fire Service. All concerns have been addressed. The proposal is compliant with all relevant safety regulations and meets community expectations. There has not been a single objection to the proposal. There is clear and strong support for the principle of the development. The proposal is in accordance with the LDP and national policy. There are no material considerations that would justify the refusal of planning permission. We therefore respectfully request that members support the recommendation that planning permission is granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do have the ward member can't be here today, but he has sent me a brief statement as such, if you'd allow me to read it out. Hi Paul, this is my response to the application. As the ward member for this proposed development, I am aware of the application, and the following is my opinion. This area is desperately underused and in dire need of development. This proposed development will have no impact on the residents who reside in Bryn Tywod, as there are industrial units plus a railway line already situated between the homes and the development. The residents should only notice an increase in traffic while construction is taking place. I have read the report and agree that there is a slight risk of flooding, but NRW are satisfied that the risk is slight. There is a greater risk of danger due to the narrow coal seams and mine gases, but this will be monitored to ensure safety issues. I am therefore in favour of this development, as it will be of great benefit when operational, and the increase in security within the area, including CCTV, would also be of significant benefit. Thanks and regards, Councillor Mark Tribe. So, any member wish to speak? Councillor Jones?
Sorry, I've come now. It's more of a general question in a way, although it does relate to this site. I did find in the report finally on page 131, it's saying about the purpose of this development is to complement existing energy related development. And I knew I'd heard of one nearby that we approved many years ago. And what I can't understand, I can't remember the capacity of the site, but would there have been a capacity to extend on that site rather than start a new site? I mean, that's a general question. It could be anywhere, but I'm just wondering why we're doing more. I mean, when we had power stations, for example, you had one and you added on to it. Are we going to see the proliferation of these kinds of sites? I'm not against it. I just want to know what the thinking is behind that we're having another new site.
That's a good question. Yeah, you remember some members may remember that there has been development of something similar in the vicinity. The proposal called Greener Grid, which was around the Abergelli power station area. So that's not a million miles away from here, to be honest. The original scheme included a battery storage element, but then it was modified to mainly deal with something called a compensator, which then kind of dealt with all the electricity infrastructure to balance the grid. Yes, I think the issue with renewable energy sources, you'll have different landowners and different farmers and different things like that. They will approach different companies to deal with renewables. And it's just a matter of the logistics then of you need to have this type of equipment, you need to be fairly close to renewable energies. You need to avoid constraints that may be localized there. Whilst it would be nice to perhaps group them together, field parcels don't always work like that. And ecological constraints and things like that always doesn't work like that. So I think you've got to, I don't think there is a one size fits all project, because you've got to look at each site on its own merit and identify which sites perhaps are least constrained than others, and perhaps go with that project ahead. We just deal with what comes into us as a planning department. We do consider the cumulative impact of development. That's fair enough. But in this particular instance, we see no reason to consider that is a significant issue in this particular instance. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not against this development, because we are moving forward and we'll find out we'll have more of these coming through, which will help the grid, will help us as far as electricity is concerned, and the fossil fuel that we always get with certain groups. So I am for this. The question I've got is, will there be any power from outside this area coming into this battery storage? And will there be a new planning application if there is? Because you said there is one not far away, and this is newer. So would there be any power exported into this, or imported, or depends where you're standing?
As I understand it, it will seek to harness the energy from existing renewable sources. Whether or not that there'll be other projects in the area that will also feed into this, I'm afraid that will be a subject of a separate application or anything like that. But as I understand it, this is purely to serve the existing infrastructure in the locality, and it needs to be nearby purely because renewable energy sources are there. Your solar panels, for example, are quite close. So the honest answer is whether or not it would feed other infrastructure in future, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see if projects and demand comes forward in the area.
Just to carry on. Only to carry on, you're saying if in future we get it, will it affect anything that's there now? Like, will it be imported from other sources of sorry, Adrian. Oh. What I'm trying to say is, if they import into this area, then it'll be done through underground or overhead, or is it just contained to this particular area?
My understanding, it would feed from the existing sources in the area rather than anything else. But perhaps the applicant or the agent might be able to clarify anything different.
Yeah, I can clarify. The primary objective is for projects in and around the area where, which are feeding into the grid. But that's not to say the grid is all interconnected. So we have, say, for example, renewable energy projects across the country, which serve energy to, users across the country. But the idea is always to have it localized. But that's not to say that you won't get generation from other renewable energy sources feeding into the Swansea grid, if that makes sense.
Get then. I did see a documentary a couple of weeks ago, and I'm right into the ecosystem, about different ways of which they release the energy from these batteries. They could be underground or overhead. I know there's a big campaign with people that don't like the pylons, rather see it underground. Which way are we aiming in Swansea? Are we going underground or are we going on the pylons now? Oh, sorry.
As I'm aware, there is no proposal to change anything from the pylons, for example. It's to put infrastructure on the ground and then tap into the existing infrastructure that's there. If there were any proposals for additional pylons or anything like that, would be a separate process altogether. So we're just assessing what's before us today, essentially. Okay.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah. Just I'm happy to support the proposal. Just one sort of a bit of clarification, really, which Councillor Tribe has already alluded to. But when it says the Coal Authority Development High Risk Area, basically, what does that imply? It's sort of, I mean, I was a bit concerned about the term high risk. Grateful.
Yeah, no problem. The Coal Authority, or what they're now known as the Mining Remediation Authority, they have got historical maps of the amount of historical coal minings that's happened in the area. Because of the intimate nature of how maps were devised back then, they only have approximate records of where the mining areas were occurring in South Wales. They will also have further details beyond that as to where perhaps mine shafts were included or added or anything that may be of significance from that. So the high referral area is mainly an area where we know that there have been past mining workings. And all that does is to help us as the local planning authority understand which areas that we need to perhaps find out a little bit more information about it. So the type of application that falls within a high referral area will pretty much always require consultation with the Coal Authority. And it's quite possible that there would be further site investigation surveys that would have to be done to find out what is actually on the site and does it pose any risk to the stability of the land in the area. So what has been flagged here is a land use constraint, that this is an area which is subject to past coal mining workings. But there have been assessment reports that has been accompanied with the application that has looked at the site in more detail. Those have been consulted then with the Coal Authority, and they've assessed the reports and have provided their comments to us. So yes, they acknowledge that the site is a coal risk area, but they do not have any technical objection to the development. And you will note that they've recommended a condition which has been put down in the list of conditions at the end. And I'm just trying to see if I can find that now. I think it relates to condition 13 and condition 14.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I just raised the matter, Chair, because sinkhole seems to be very much in the news lately with so much rain that we're getting. I'm just wondering whether the batteries would be underground by default, perhaps. I don't know. Well,
Thank you all, and thank you for your contributions. Unless anyone else wishes to speak, we can see the recommendation there is to approve this application. So we take that now then, please.
Yeah, councillor Myra Baker,
Approve.
councillor Peter Black,
For.
Bill Downing,
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For.
Mike Lewis,
For.
Richard Lewis, Nicola Matthews,
For.
Mike White,
For.
Andrew Williams,
For.
and Paul Lloyd.
Oh,
It's unanimous. Chair 11-4.
thank you very much. That's carried. And we can now revert back to the original agenda. We move on to the first item under item 6. You find there on page 32, which is the Harvard Morva Copperworks. And that's David and Steve here.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, members. Yeah, so item 1 on the agenda, which is 2024-1655. And it needs, as indicated, it needs to be considered in conjunction with the corresponding application for listed building consent, which is the second item on the agenda, and 2024-1662 LBC. So essentially, the application is for redevelopment of the Vivian and Musgrave engine houses in the Harvard Copperworks. So this is a full application, first of all, for the restoration and redevelopment of the engine houses and associated chimneys. Proposals include the restoration of the engine houses as well as the construction of a new link building between the two. The engine house will be redeveloped to a shell and core standard to maximise potential of the building to future tenants initially, which could entail sort of food and beverage uses or shops, like a cafe type use. The Musgrave engine house will be solely as an exhibition area and display of the original Musgrave engine house, hence the flexible uses which are sought for this consent. So both the Vivian and Musgrave engine houses are part of the only, well, several surviving buildings left at the Harvard Copperworks. Obviously, they're desperate in need of renovation. So the Vivian engine house is a listed building. There's also the chimney, which is listed, the boundary wall of the former Harvard Copperworks canal docks, which are listed. And the Musgrave engine house is obviously listed, and this chimney, and it's also a scheduled monument. So there's a corresponding application for scheduled monument consent submitted directly to Cardiff for consideration. So this project is part of the UK government Levelling Up Fund for the regeneration of the Copperworks site, and it's trying to promote connectivity between the Copperworks and the city centre, and is being referred to as the Lower Swansea Valley Levelling Up project. So this is another key project being delivered by our colleagues in the Economic Regeneration Department, and this, I think, is an important once-in-a-generation opportunity, not only to restore the buildings, but also to seek a long-term economical use of for these unique heritage buildings. So we will go through a presentation shortly, where Steve will present. So obviously that will pick up on the key heritage and archaeological issues as part of the presentation, and obviously they are picked up in the report for the LBC as well. But just to go through some of the key planning issues, first of all. So the site is allocated as a strategic development area as part of the Copperworks Towie Riverside Harvard Copperworks site. SDL policy and the local plan, mixed use, heritage, culture-led regeneration, site contributing to the preservation, enhancement of the area's unique historic and cultural heritage. And the key placemaking principles include mixed-use heritage-led development, restoration of the buildings, heritage visitor centre, and a mix of uses from employment, residential, hotel, restaurant, bar, etc., to try and create a destination. And that's part of a proposed master plan for the wider area. And obviously, you're aware of the Penderian Whiskey distillery is part of those proposals. Development proposals should positively reflect this historical industrial riverside character. Development should bring the listed Copperworks buildings back into use for appropriate new functions. So obviously, it's all in accordance with the prevailing development plan policy for the local area. I mentioned quickly the ecological value of the site. There are obviously lots of ecological issues, but the key issue is that there are two common pipistrelle roosts in the Vivian house and one in the Musgrave engine house. So the bat roost will obviously be retained in the Vivian engine house, but the bat house will be bat roost. Sorry, it will be impacted in the Musgrave engine house. This will require compensatory roosting features in the form of bat boxes, and it will also require a European protected species license from Natural Resources Wales. So obviously it's a separate procedure, but obviously the development has accounted for these issues. The other main issue I'll mention is flood risk. So whilst the areas around the site flood, it was found that the ground level works of the Vivian and Musgrave engine houses are currently raised above predicted flood levels in TAN 15 design events. However, the basement of the Vivian engine house is vulnerable to flooding. NRW acknowledged that the proposal is for a heritage redevelopment of the site, and by virtue of its location and historical nature cannot be reclaimed, and ultimately indicates that it's for the LPA to determine whether the risks associated consequence of flooding can be managed in accordance with TAN 15. A significant weight is afforded to the fact that the development would secure the restoration of the heritage structures for current and future generations, and this is considered to outweigh the relatively minor conflict with TAN 15, and the consequences posed by the flooding can be mitigated and managed as far as possible. Also mention the highways transport issues. We'll go through the presentation shortly, but there is an access road proposed to the buildings, but this will only serve as emergency access, deliveries, refuse vehicles, etc. It'll have a turning head at the end, and it'll give access to the Musgrave engine house, which will allow its restoration by the Friends, etc. In terms of car parking, obviously the car parking as currently is that you've got the park and ride, the overspill car park, and there is quite a discrete parking provided for the Coupleworks site itself. So those will be serve the development in the short term. Obviously, there are other regeneration schemes coming forward, which may result in the park and ride being closed in the future. So those proposals will need to accommodate the parking for this development. But as I say, it is in itself, it's not a major trip generator, and the future car parking will depend on those future redevelopment proposals. I'll just mention the update sheet for you. There's some updates to condition 2, which is the drawings, but just for references have been updated. And there's some late correspondence from HENIB, formerly GGAT. They haven't, basically they're willing to defer comment to CADU, as much of the site is a scheduled monument, which takes priority. However, we are proposing to amend condition 14, which is to do with the foundations, to have regard to the archaeological works, and impose an additional condition 23 with regards a archaeological watching brief. So these two applications, planning and listed building consent, we'll do a joint presentation. You need to obviously vote separately on both applications, but Steve will now take you through the presentation for both. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman. You mentioned bats in your report. What I was surprised at, you said it was the European. Why are we taking crap from Europe?
It's still the legislation which applies to protected species.
Well, I think it's rubbish. We shouldn't be taking stuff from Europe. And I think at the end of the day, they make us spend money, which we haven't got half the time. Anyway.
Thank you.
But what we might be.
Okay, thank you. Just on this slide here, just procedurally, the reason why the listed building consent application has been reported to planning committees because the council is both the applicant and the regulating body. As per a lot of these listed building consents I sit before you presenting, it can't be decided under delegated powers, and quite rightly, these applications are important, and that's the reason why they're being reported to planning committee. On the screen there, the red line, this is just so you've got your bearings there. These are the engine houses on the riverfront. So you've got adjacent the recently installed pontoons. There's image of these further in the presentations for the Copper Jack and other boats that may go up and down the river. And Penderyn is just off the plan to the north. So Penderyn is phase 1 of the Copper Works regeneration. Effectively, this engine house project is phase 2, funded by, as you heard, UK government levelling up funding there as part of the Lower Swansea Valley project. If we go to the next slide, please, in. So a few images there extracted, a very extensive supporting document for this project. It's probably one of the most well-researched applications I've seen, and a very kind of extensive multidisciplinary team preparing that. The works through its different ages, top left is around about 1920s, so when the works was at its heyday, pretty much covering a huge amount of the Lower Swansea Valley. These kind of structures and sheds and chimneys and all the kind of pollution that came with that. It was a very kind of distinct place, very globally significant for the copper and metallurgical industries. The top right is in this sort of immediate post-war period when the works were still operating but starting to run down. Bottom left is in its last few years of operation. You can see there large parts of the site have been cleared, but I think that's 1977. The works closed in 1980, so 3 years before closure there. And then the bottom right is roughly about millennium time. I think it's 1997 to be precise. By that period, 1997, the site had been cleared, and the remaining structures, which had were protected basically by heritage designation, were then clearly vacant and derelict. So that gives you a bit of an introduction to the sort of the evolution and the site. Next slide, please. So that's that closer view, 1997, taken from, I presume, a helicopter at the time. Looking down on the site, you can see the engine houses are roofless. You can see the sort of external area which contains those copper rolls, which was so important to the whole process here. Sorry. And the site was derelict. But what you can see in that image there, I don't have the exact dates to mind, but you've got the barrage, I think. By that point there, the River Tower had been impounded by 1997. So you've got the riverfront there. Next slide, please. So this is the view as of last year of these engine houses. So just to quickly run you through which one's which, because we'll be referring to them both. They've both got specific names. The one on the left on the screen there with the hipped roof is the Musgrave engine house, which was the sort of major technological advance of the copper works. It was constructed in 1910 to house what's known as the Musgrave steam engine, which is they were an engineering company from Bolton up north in England, and they would have typically produced mill engines. So that was this new power source for the copper works. 1910 that opened. It ran up until works closure in 1980, so it's still running on steam right till the end. It was designated Grade 2 listed in 1980, and that would have protected it basically from being scrapped and demolished. It was then scheduled in 1995, so it was given a further heritage status beyond that, a similar status to Oystermouth Castle is scheduling. So that's some of the most important sites. And at the same time with the scheduling, it protected the external machinery, the copper rolls that went with it, which makes this unique. It's one of the few. So there's lots of colliery winding engines and machinery like that across Wales, but very few that would have been associated with the metal industries intact in their original locations. And in 2019, so a few years before this picture here, the roof was fully reconstructed and repaired to protect the interior. The engine house on the right is known as the Vivian engine house. This is the older one of the two. They originally opened in 1862. We know that precisely because there's a plaque above the door with that date. It was extended and altered in 1910, so there must have been some big work investment in that time when they made it a lot bigger. The actual engine in the Vivian engine house was removed sometime probably just after the Second World War, and it became a compressor house. So that engine house is empty. Grade 2 listed 1997, and in 2020 the roof on that building was also repaired. So we've had a program here of starting to safeguard our heritage assets by putting roofs on them, stopping them deteriorate further, helping them to dry out, whilst working out what to do with them. And now, thankfully, with the levelling up funding, we're able to move into that next gear in terms of looking at actually creating these shell and core projects to bring commercial activity to this waterfront destination. We've also got the two chimneys. The one on the left is associated or adjacent to the Musgrave engine house. The taller one on the right, which is red brick, is listed in its own right, known as the Vivian chimney, and that was a boiler house chimney. And there would have been hundreds of these chimneys around the Lower Swansea Valley. These are the last two of these iconic structures. Okay, next slide, please. This starts to take you for a little bit of a tour around the site as it is at the moment. Currently completely fenced off, not accessible apart from the very occasional, I think once a year, the site is opened up for the Cadw Heritage Open Days, which I think is in autumn time typically. So that's the Musgrave engine house after the roof has been repaired. And on the right-hand side there, they're those copper rolls that survive. They're pretty much intact. You can still see the marks where the last copper plate was run through. And they are, internationally significant to survive in this original location. Next slide, please. So this is inside the Musgrave engine house, which has had the roof put back on. The engine is pretty much all there. It's rusty, but it's 90% complete is the view. There's a very strong friends group, the Friends of the Havard Morva Copper Works, that are very keen to start restoring the engine. It is protected by the scheduling. Cadw are supportive of the project. Already the crane has been restored by the Friends group and dropped back in, and that's an operational crane again that's already been used to start some of the restoration of one of the smaller parts of the engine in the space there. So that's this is potentially this heritage attraction destination. Next slide, please. So this is what it was like right up to the end 1980s. These are images available online when it was still operating, and this is what it could potentially go back to there. Next slide, please. This is the other engine house, the Vivian engine house. It's a much more kind of varied, almost eclectic building, the way it's been altered and extended. You can see on the left-hand side there, that's the main entrance doors, and above that is with a plaque with the 1862 date. Next slide, please. Internally, as I mentioned before, the engine that would have been in here with the big flywheel similar to the Musgrave was removed sometime around about just after the Second World War. It became this compressor house providing air for the works, as my understanding, and it's now an empty space. So it's had the roof repaired as well, and it's a big double height space. That's quite considerable volume inside there. Okay, next slide, please. And this is also that Vivian chimney, the closer up view, which is in fair condition, but it has got some vegetation issues. You can see it growing up there. Next slide, please. So this is as part of the early work in 2024. The whole site has been archaeologically investigated. It's called strip mapping and recording. And it's revealed not just the engine houses are significant, it's also revealed extensive, nationally significant archaeology. It appears this area was all covered by roofs of the works, and it would have had metal sheeting on the floor, which was all taken up when the works was scrapped. And underneath that, it's revealed this whole network of flues and voids and complicated features that maybe we don't fully understand. But there's a huge amount of interest on this site, not just the buildings. Next slide, please. Next slide, sorry, Ian. That's the view ground level, all sorts of complications there. Very good archaeological teams making sense of what it all is. What the issue is, it can't be exposed in the kind of end project because it's delicate and it will break up and crumble. So it has to be recorded and then covered as part of the project, which we'll come on to. Next slide, please. And this is the further series of archaeological investigations around those copper rolls, sort of seeing what's there underneath the ground, the kind of covering. Next slide, please. And this is what the site would have been like into the 1980s there. This is that same area of those copper rolls I showed you before there. You can see, and actually that's sort of the piece on the sort of the moving rolling table is a piece of copper that's being rolled, heated and rolled. And the reason why this site survived so long, it was making boiler plates, I think, for power stations. And it was one of the few places. There we go. So yeah, it was one of the few places that could do this, and that's why it survived for so long. And this is literally the part of the site we're looking at today in this amazing photograph here. Next slide, please. So now we're on to the proposed plans. That's the red line plan there we've showed you before. Starting in the north with a shared access route coming off the turning area for the park and ride, which provides service access for delivery vehicles, fire access, and it's primarily also a walking and cycling route coming down. You've got blue badge parking up in the top there in the north, where you've got that existing Copperworks car park, and then you've got that route down to the buildings. If we go on to the next slide, because I know it's not the easiest to see on the screen. So this is the ground floor plan, and the point to make about these engine houses is the engine floor levels are circa 2 meters high because of the big flywheels, and they kind of had to have the axle points higher up. So there's all sorts of voids and basements, which is positive because of the flood risk you heard about, which means the commercial space, which is on the next slide, is raised above potential flood levels. So this is starting to show you where the link building is going to go. It's also showing you towards the riverfront on the right-hand side there, the covering. There's going to be a roof put over. There's external copper roll. So they'll be protected from the elements, protected from vandalism and metal theft, and it will allow the potential to start restoring them. Whether they'll ever operate again, that's further decisions, discussions, consents and funding, but at least it protects them, these important assets that are held by public bodies. Next slide, please. So this is getting into that upper ground floor. You start to see the new link building here, which wraps around two sides of the wraps around two sides of the Vivian engine house and connects onto part of the Musgrave engine house. It's probably easier if we go to the next slide because it's zoomed in. Thank you, Ian. So this is zooming in on that same slide there, showing you see what's going on there. So the Musgrave engine house is proposed to become a heritage attraction in its own right, as a visitor space only. There's no commercial activity proposed inside the Musgrave engine house, given its scheduled status with the in-situ engine. The Vivian engine house is circa 100 square meters and would have a new mezzanine floor, a new first floor installed over most of the upper level, circa 80 square meters. And then the link building you can see on the screen there, wrapping around the Vivian engine house, we've got some 3D images later, is another 200 square meters. So the commercial space is 380 meters, so just under 400 square meters, which has been tested. This is shell and core, so it's not, there's no specific toilets and kitchens at this point because that's not what's the funding for, but it's created a flexible space that could be a restaurant, it could be a cafe, it could be shops, it could be I think financial professional services. There's the range of use classes in the proposal there, A1 and A2, A3, and then D1 as a potential visitor centre as well. So it's creating this flexibility, and the proposal would be with the scheme achieving consent and the shell and core work on site, and then the potential tenants would be invited to become involved, and then it would fine tune the project with a further application for the fit out would be required. Next slide, please. This is just the first floor level. There's a mezzanine inside the Vivian, and also there's the roof over the external rolls cover there. Next slide, please. This is that archaeology again, which I've talked about before. So this is that nationally significant archaeology, and this would be recorded and covered back up in order to create the foundations for the new link building. But what it does require, and I think you can see it on the screen there, there's about 6 areas highlighted in red. They're voids where there's basically remains of old flues or tunnels, let's call them, in the site, which need the tops to be taken off. So this area is Kirchlid listed, and partly it's scheduled by CADU. So there's a red line on the screen there. The area to the south of that red line is controlled by CADU under the scheduled monument consent. The area to the north of the red line is controlled by yourselves as part of the planning application with the listed building consent today. So those red areas would basically have the tops taken off in order that the site can be consistently backfilled. So they would need to be recorded. Then the tops would be lifted, and then it can be filled up to the level for the new structures. So there's a bit of loss. There's not much loss, but they are understood as to what they are. They're mainly furnace flues and some sort of later structures over the top. So it's important you're aware that those changes are proposed. And next slide, please. But what also the proposal is the new public realm areas reflect the character of the works, and it wasn't extravagant high quality surfaces. It was a functional work, so the surfaces were concrete, they were tarmac, they were possibly some pennant stone. And what this project's doing is using some of those references in the materials and the archaeology that's been found to create an interesting public realm. So whilst the archaeology cannot be exposed, it can be kind of features can be copied through onto the new surfaces. There's about a foot or so of cover, 30 centimeters, has to go over the top of the archaeology to create the new levels. And then some of those features get replicated on the top to create interest and to aid interpretation. Next slide, please. This is the green infrastructure plan. The key point to make, there's extensive retained green infrastructure. There's a new green roof to the link building. And there's also off-site compensatory tree planting because a number of trees do have to be felled in order to deliver this project. Next slide, please. This is a complicated plan, and this is all about drainage. The SUDS, Sustainable Urban Drainage, is a separate consenting regulatory regime to planning. It sits in parallel. It's very complicated on this site because you can't put the pipes in the ground because of the archaeology. So there's been a lot of working with the design team in order to create the attenuation required for the suds, to hold the water back, to cleanse it, to give the biodiversity amenity requirements of the sud standards before water is discharged into the Towey, whilst keeping it as much as possible above the archaeological layers. So that's all about where there's a rain garden which holds the water with planting, and where there's a pipe. So that's actually proven to be very challenging, but we've got to a solution there. And it's shown in the visual images. The key thing for the suds is integrated as a really positive feature within the public realm. Next slide, please. So this next sequence are the existing and proposed contextual elevations. So that's currently the existing north elevation. And the key point to make is the engine houses that we have today are fragments. This site was covered by sheds and roofs and other structures, and it's just the engine houses survived, and it's not representative. This isn't how the works ever was. So that's currently what we've got with the 2 engine houses and the 2 chimneys and the external copper rolls situation looking north. Next slide, please. So this is that first view of the link building, which is joining onto, in this view, onto the Vivian engine house. It's a single-story structure with that floor level 2 meters high because of the flood and the internal floor levels. It's set down from the roof edges of the existing engine houses. The materials is a very very highly glazed building, excuse me, and it's using Corten steel or sort of coppery, browny, rusty colours that pick up on the metalworks character. It's got a green growing roof, and also you can see the roof that goes over those external rolls covers there. And on the riverfront, I would also point out that the scheme has been carefully designed to retain 4 meters clear width on the river path edge, which allows for future active travel upgrades with the potential West Bank Towey project for shared use. So that's not being implemented as part of this, but it's keeping that option open for walking and cycling to come past there. Next slide, please. So this is the existing east elevation onto the river. Again, you can see the 2 engine houses, chimneys, and the external machinery. Next slide. This is a very clear view of the 2 new structures proposed, the new link building with the glass and the Corten steel, the green roof, joining the 2 engine houses there, and then the kind of repeating gables of the cover over the roll structure, kind of replicating some of those industrial sheds that would have been on site in the past. Next slide, please. This is the view from the south, kind of looking towards along almost the shared access route existing on the screen there. Next slide in, please. And that's the proposed. You don't see the link building from the south because it's kind of screened by the Musgrave engine house, but you do see the link. Sorry, you do see the roll structure covering over, and also you can see that 4 meter clear width on the river path, where you've also got the river bus boat pontoons as well existing. Next slide, please. And this is this is the west existing elevation here. So it's existing. And the next slide in, please. And this starts to show you how the link building joins the two buildings. This is effectively onto the shared access route and the different structures I've described there before. Next slide, please. Just one section drawing here, and what the main thing to highlight here, this shows you the slice that's cut through the Vivian engine house and that new mezzanine floor level, that new first floor level. It's a very high space. It would have had the engine inside, and it's more than enough for 2 levels of accommodation for a restaurant, cafe, and that sort of thing in there. It's got stairs proposed at this side, but there's no lift at the moment because that will be part of the future fit out for the tenants. So that would be fine tuned in future. Next slide, please. So this is the level of detail we have to go to on listed building applications. There's a huge amount of information on there. The point to say is every feature on these buildings has been analysed for significance, and almost every stone has been checked for condition and repair and work. So that's what these sorts of drawings look at, as how do you sensitively restore these heritage assets. This is the Vivian engine house, which is the one under listed building consent control. I'm not going to show you an image for the Musgrave engine house because that's under schedule control with CADU, but this is the sort of level that we have to go to on these projects. Next one, please. So back to the existing image I showed you before, taken last year, just to remind us what we currently have, these fragments, these engine houses without context, a fence around them because you can't get up to them. They're not active, they're not engaging with the river, but they are there, they've survived. Next slide, please, in. So these are the CGI images that really start to bring the whole project to life for you here. Similar view to that previous photograph there. You can see the link building wrapping around the Vivian engine house with its green roof and the Corten kind of metal elements and lots of glazing. You can also see the external terrace that links to that there, which is 2 meters high as well. So great elevated views from that area over the river. You can start to see some of the public realm features, these lines in the external areas that are picking up on some of the key archaeological features. And you can see the more industrial roof representing the old sheds for the covers over the Musgrave Rolls. The retained 4 metre wide area for the river path down onto the Towway with the pontoon shown there. And to the rear of the engine houses, you've got the shared access route as well that will pass through for servicing, firefighting access, as well as walking and cycling. Next slide, please. So this would be the northern approach. If you've parked in that Blue Badge parking area or parked in the park and ride or come on the bus, you would walk down towards the engine houses along this route here. You can see this kind of arrangement of ramps and steps because you've got to traverse the 2 metre high level change. You've got various features representing where the other roles were for the Vivian engine house. You can see the new link building is clearly contemporary, it's bold, but yet it's subservient to the engine houses. So it's not trying to compete, it's not trying to literally recreate the sheds, but it's being sort of referencing to what the history was. Next slide, please. So this is the view along that shared access route where you would have independent access into the Musgrave engine house, which could be that heritage destination, as well as the linking building between the two structures there. So you'd be able to walk and cycle past this area primarily, but also this is where the deliveries would come in for the commercial use. Next slide, please. This is the view from the river path there with the cover over the rolls where you'd see the copper rolls inside. You've got a rain garden along the edge here as well, holding back the water before it goes into the Towway. The materials proposed on this part of the site is brick. The site's got all sorts of different characters, and one thing is a lot of brickwork, which can be replicated. Possibly some of it could be reused, but it would definitely have that kind of industrial aesthetic character. Next slide, please. Then this is looking to that courtyard effectively on the front where I've mentioned there's a 2 metre high external terrace. The public realm would pick up those features of the archaeology as well. And you can see that again the same thing as I said before. The link building, it's bold, but it's subservient to the building, to the engine houses. It's clearly contemporary, but picking up on some of the colours and materials and character that would have been around the works when it was operating. And I think this is the last slide. Next one, please, Ian. Right, last slide. This is the view. Effectively, if you've come off the pontoon from the riverboat, you're accessing into the site. You've got this new building here. Again, the link building, as I've mentioned before, is flexible use. It could be a restaurant, it could be a cafe, it could be retail, it could be professional services, it could be a visitor centre, but it's designed to be very distinctive and flexible, very open and engaging, as well as then this sort of separate building covering over those roles externally. Both engine houses would be fully restored. And yeah, there's a lot of information there. There's a lot of information in the report. So it's all been very carefully assessed by your officers. We've had spent a lot of time negotiating this to get to this point with a design team that's been very receptive, and obviously a council client team that's been very positive to work with here. It is bold, but it is sensitive to the context. It is a key part of the Copperworks regeneration, bringing these two engine houses back to life, both for commercial activity and for heritage restoration, destination on the waterfront as part of that wider regeneration site, enhancing the setting of those assets as well. So we've talked about the works that need to happen in the ground in order to, there's this archaeology, it's clearly there, it's been understood, it would need to be covered back over as part of that. So the recommendation, as you'll see in the reports, there is both approval of the planning application and approval of the listed building consent application, subject to the usual referral to CADU on all listed building consent applications. And there's conditions on both applications to control all sorts of details. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Our ward member first, Councillor White.
Yeah, can I just say, it's wonderful to see the area that was once, as I say, and a thriving industry there. And then unfortunately, through the recession, sadly the works closed, and as was said, fell into a lot of disrepair with vandalism and arson and that, and it really, the area really did look run down. And I'm very grateful for the investment now going into the works. Hopefully regenerate that area immensely, and hopefully will bring employment to the area as well. I think that's important as well. Can I just ask, Steve, in regards to under highways, page 48, please, the road that you're talking about, which I was surprised to hear the name of it when I was at the report, of the road that's coming in, the Way Road. How far off is this now from where the park and ride gate is coming in, Steve? Because that comes on the back as well. Can you just for us to have an idea? Because I can visualize, the only road I can visualize from there off there is the roadway that runs more or less past parallel with the Lando Social Club, which is obviously in quite a very, very poor condition. Is that the road that we're talking about, that we're looking to make 4 meters?
Ian, if we zoom in on the north, so where you've what this currently you've got the, let's call it the park and ride roundabout.
Yes.
So this is, you've currently got a spur coming off the south of that park and ride roundabout that takes you into the overflow gravel car park.
Yeah, that's opposite. Yeah.
Yep.
But when
And-
it comes off Neath Road, off the route, Neath Road, you got to come under the tunnel.
Yes, you do.
And then you got to go onto that what we call the Busgate Road.
Yes.
Now the only other road I know apart from that is the one that runs parallel beside of the Lando Social Club.
No, it doesn't affect either. On the screen
Right.
there. Actually, if you go to the proposed site plan, Ian, it comes off the effectively the access to the overflow car park.
Right.
So it doesn't come off the Morva Road. It doesn't come off the bus link. It's off that spur that goes to the overflow car park. You know where the current chimney feature is, the art
Yes,
feature.
yeah.
It comes through that
By
car
the
park.
seating area there.
Yeah. So basically, from that existing access point, it runs parallel to the path that's there existing to the, so it runs parallel to the path that runs to the river, so it doesn't come off the bus route.
Right.
And it's on the screen there behind me there. So it's that 4 meter wide route. It doesn't, because if it was to come off the top Morva Road, the gradients are too high, it's too steep.
Yeah. Okay. And in regards to that road, because it's multi-use, obviously, can we ensure that there's proper lighting on that road? You know, I think that's very, very important, because we've got 1 or 2 pathways which is more or less nearby the Penderyn, which we've had to chase up to have additional lighting there. So can we ensure that that road is and will it be, and because you say for pedestrian use, will it be footpaths included in that as well?
Yes, so it's a shared route. There wouldn't be general traffic access. So if you were driving a vehicle to the engine houses, let's say, there'd be an access bollard. You'd have an arranged delivery time. The bollard would lower and the vehicle would come down. You wouldn't have general public driving down this route. It's only for that controlled servicing or emergency vehicles, but it would be fully open for walking and cycling as a shared space through there. So yeah, it would be that sort of, it wouldn't be a standard adopted road. And then the rest of the site you can see on the screen there that's not within the red line area, that's part of that wider future regeneration site as allocated in the LDP. There could be all sorts of other things happening in future there, but this is the kind of arrangement to access the engine houses for now.
Yeah. In regards to the link building, you say obviously it's mainly of glass. What security provisions are going to be in place around that site? Seeing that building is mainly glass, you know, and facing on more or less onto the path and the river bank. So what provisions are in place for the actual security around there?
This is something we've asked the design team to clarify, actually, because I share your views there that this site could be vulnerable, and it's not very clear on the plans, but I can assure you there's a kind of perimeter around the building of various gates and areas to stop you getting out of hours, getting close to the building for security. The hope is the end tenant would be in the building, you know, late into the evening. So there would be that sort of lights on, that presence, that natural surveillance would be there as much as possible. But then there's also this line, there's a kind of security line where the gates can be shut and people are kept away from the structure.
Right. In regards then to you mentioned the external ladder. Now, is that down on by the engine, because where you got the muzzle end, you do it then inside the local mill itself, next to where the roads are. Now, that ladder was there for the gantry driver to service the different things that need to be done with the different sort of especially with the big plates that used to be rolled there and used to be cut on the main saw area down the bottom end of the mill. But is that ladder obviously still there? And also there used to be a cab there for the driver. Obviously, is the if the cab is still in there?
There's no cab as such, not that I'm aware of, like a cabin. The ladder that
It's like a small sort of one person, because sort of we go up the ladder and then go into the cab, and then he would drive the gantry then up and down the mill to service the different areas.
Yeah, no, the ladder itself, I think we've referred to in the report, is the remnants of a ladder within the Vivian engine house.
Right.
There's I think you're referring to what would have been outside where the copper rolls are.
Yeah, yeah.
So any sort of high level structures like a crane or machinery you're referring to there would have been removed in the 1980s when the site was scrapped.
Right.
So putting the cover back over the top is high enough that you could put a small crane inside in future, but it wouldn't, my understanding, it wouldn't be a traveling crane again.
Right. Okay.
But it's creating a cover over the rolls so you could restore them.
Yeah, because I noticed within the Penderyn site they've actually left one of the gantry ones still there, haven't they?
They have in the rolling the barrel store in the rolling mill there.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
George?
I'm not sure how the chair knew without me indicating that I was going to speak. I didn't actually indicate. I was thinking of it. First of all, it's quite worrying I'm going to give my age away before long, that this was actually in production in my lifetime. So it is worrying when you think about it like that. Actually, I wanted some... I didn't look, it's my own fault. I want some more information about the SUDS and the attenuation tank, pond, whatever they've got there, and has it got anything around it? Because thinking we're encouraging tourists, and I am really worried. They all know here, every time we talk about a housing development, I always ask about the attenuation tank or pond or whatever we're going to have. So I want some reassurance that it is going to be made safe. And I've got to ask a question. It's like a history lesson today. It's been, very good. But haven't we had an application, it might be number 3, before us quite recently, when we were looking at the covers? Yeah. Didn't you bring something in? I'm sure I've heard some of this before. Anyway, thank you, Steve. It's always a very interesting and informative presentation as well. So perhaps I can just have the answer about my pond.
Yep. In terms of SUDS, there's no open water features. Obviously, the site is right by the River Tower. The river bus pontoons that were put in, I think, a year or 2 years ago, has new edge railings, protection along the river edge. That's all along the frontage there already. The SUDS within the site are rain gardens, so they're raised planters with vegetation in them. It's got so if there will be water within the soil and the matrix, but not standing water. There is an open channel running through the site to move the water around. As I mentioned, we can't really put pipes in the ground, and that would have some sort of metal grate over the top, so you'd almost walk over the top of it. But in this site, actually, on the main site there isn't, but actually further south there's an existing pond, shallow pond, which would be used as like an ecological sort of marshy area. But in terms of the main visitor attraction, there wouldn't be any open water around the engine houses immediately. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I got Councillor Black next, and then Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I understand, of course, that we're making considering this application on the basis of what's already there. But in terms of future proofing, the development around the zip wire is going to take up a large part of the car parking in this site. So I'm just wondering, I think the park and ride is due to move if that application is approved. So in terms of the future, and if that application is approved, is there going to be enough parking on site to cope with the demand for a visitor attraction and whatever commercial uses is put in place?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Black. It's a good question. I have tried to address it in the report, but yeah, so as I say, in the short term, we're going to use the existing parking. Yes, obviously, if the Skyline development goes ahead, or other developments, in fact, yes, there is an aspiration to impact on the Landau Park and Ride, which will probably close, but it will be redeveloped for its own car parking. So I think there will be a requirement, and obviously we as landowner will need to maintain parking for this facility in itself. So that will be subject to future development proposals coming before committee effectively.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was nice to hear Mike speak with a passion, because I'm sure on the first photo we've seen, I'm sure I've seen him there. Yeah. The big plus on this is that we're looking after our heritage and history, which is absolutely fantastic, because I've gone through everywhere I've worked since, I won't tell you when, because you know what my age is, but in every one of those sites, 90% of them have now got houses on. And so we've lost a lot of our history, because I can remember what was there, but obviously children don't. But this is a big boost to our tourism as well, because there's a lot more can be done there. There was another planning that's going to come to us, been mentioned, which I wasn't going to mention. But if everything comes, this will be a most popular area in Swansea. And it's very, very exciting. So, yeah, it's nice to see what went on, because I didn't know what went on there, because I live in Pondylis. You know, I could never walk this distance. But yes, it is nice since I've been on the council, and we've been to a site visit on a couple of times on a couple of committees I've been on, and you delve in and then you see Penderyn's gone there. And I don't know if anybody's been to Penderyn. Will they get a history lesson first? Which tells people not about the whiskey, but about Swansea and what went on with the copper works and everything, which is absolutely fantastic. Yes, well, I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I had a couple of points, but Councillor Black has brought the first one up regarding the zip wire. I thought, before I go on, Steve, I thought that presentation was absolutely wonderful, you know, and I fully support the whole proposal, the whole development. But I was just thinking in the terms of the pontoon and the which I think will be an integral part of a means of getting the public to view. I was just wondering, has any thought been given to the fact that it might increase the river traffic up the tower, and would there be a need for some kind of navigation so as to avoid collisions, because it is narrow? And I was just wondering, has any thought been given to that sort of traffic, river traffic, which would be something new, I would think. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, obviously with any site now, it's all about active travel, different means of all sorts of means of getting there. You know, it's not just about driving and parking cars. That's clearly important. There's potentially that future, well, there is active travel links, walking and cycling. There's potentially this West Bank Tower walking and cycling route, which is in places but not fully accessible. And it's one of the few sites, as you say quite rightly, you can actually potentially get to by boat. Currently, it's just the Swansea Jack. Yeah, Copper Jack, sorry, apologies. There might be future navigation. Obviously, that's out of future other boats. There are rowing clubs and paddle boarders also using the river at this point here. And that would be under separate control. I think the marina manager in the down in would control maybe some of these things and how it operates. It's a council pontoon, and so whoever would tie up there would need the permissions and the insurances and all that sort of thing. So it's controlled by other parts of the council who disembarks at this point. The vision is, because obviously it's part of the wider levelling up project for the Lower Swansea Valley, is to put more pontoons in. So the idea would be there's further pontoons, other applications for these, one up towards the stadium near the what would have been the Basquiat Bridge, and another one downstream towards Newcut Road. So you'd have this potential for a sort of a future river taxi service starting to put the infrastructure in.
Thank you, Steve. I thought I had visions of power boaters, going up there at 20, 25, 30 knots, but knowing that inland waters is a 4 knots maximum speed.
Yeah. Okay. I got no other members wishing to speak. So we got 2 votes here. One is that item 1, which is the redevelopment of the Vivian and Musgrave engine house and chimneys, etc. The second vote is then the listed building consent. Yeah, so we take those two in that order. So then shall we do, oh, sorry, Bob.
So we could do it as one vote in the one. Do you want to do that? Yeah. So
Chair, could I just refer then to the update sheet, because there's some amendments to the conditions on item 1 and also on the listed building consent as well. So again, this on the listed buildings and drawing numbers, which are the same. And I think the amended wording on condition 9 and 2 new conditions as well, which I look to be inserted as well. And maybe a suggestion, maybe that condition 7 is amended to refer to lighting as well. Yeah.
Oh my God, right, so voting on the two applications with the amendments that have been discussed, so Councillor Meyer Baker,
For,
Peter Black,
For.
Bill Downing,
For.
Alan Jeffrey,
For.
Mary Jones,
For,
Mike Lewis,
For.
Nicola Matthews,
for,
Mike White,
For.
Andrew Williams,
For.
Paul Lloyd.
For.
That's unanimous 10-4, Chair.
Ian, is there a presentation, a few slides to put back up? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is that full screen? Okay. Right, so this is effectively a linked part of the project. So this is the archaeology that we were speaking about earlier. Maybe we could just quickly jump to the next slide, Ian. So it's the same location. It's the engine houses that we've just been talking about. And then the next slide, Ian, please. So the archaeology that we were talking about before, this nationally significant archaeology that's been revealed during the strip mapping and recording exercise, it's delicate. It's all these flues, it's these pits, it's these areas it wasn't designed to be exposed. It was underneath these floors. You've heard me say that before. And if the frost gets into these areas, it destroys them. So this was all exposed last year into sort of the autumn time, and it needed to be protected. So as part of a sort of an urgent action, it's been covered with blankets and then plastic sheeting effectively to get it through the winter. The hope is that a contractor will be engaged very shortly on this project, and it'll only be protected for one season, and then the main project will start. A couple of pictures there just about the level of archaeology that's been discovered. These always got interesting features, some of which we understand, some of which we don't. Next slide, please. That's the area that has to be protected. Covered basically plastic sheeting to deal with the rain and the frosts. And then the next slide, please. So this is effectively a retrospective application. It's already been put there. It's basically like big thick pond liners. They're like damp proof membranes that they stop the water going through, stop the archaeology getting saturated and freezing, and then it all breaking up. And then the next slide, please. So that whole area before, where we showed you where the link building's going to go, where all this new cover's going to go, it has to be protected at present, pending the main project. So that's basically, and this because it's covering up the archaeology, it's within the listed, curtilage listed area and the scheduled area. So CADU had control of the area closest to the Musgrave engine house on the left there. That's by the scheduled monument consenting process. And as planning committee LPA, it's the area outside of that, the decision today. There were some concerns from CADU, which are covered in the update sheet there, specifically about the use of concrete blocks, because they were concerned the concrete blocks might break through that membrane on top. It's a very, very tough membrane. It does not break. That's been clarified. The concrete blocks won't crumble and break, not for within sort of one season's worth of waiting down. And CADU were also concerned, and you saw on that previous image there, the water ponding basically, and if the water sits on top, it might freeze and it might damage the archaeology below. So CADU did have some concerns about whether this was quite working to protect the archaeology. It has been addressed in what's called an updated written scheme of investigation, which is something the archaeologists produce for these sorts of projects to confirm that concrete blocks are totally fine for short-term use to weight things down, because obviously you don't want these tarpaulin covers, they're not tarpaulins, they're very thick, you don't want these coverings blowing away in a storm, so you need to weight them down. Concrete blocks are fine, but also there's a methodology for removing water so it doesn't pond. So someone could go around with a small pump and pump it out or brush the water away. So it sounds simple, but these are the sorts of things that the level of detail these projects with this significant archaeology gets involved in. So the work's already taken place. It has to come to planning committee because the council is both the applicant and regulating body. So it's a formalising process just to retrospectively grant consent to protect the archaeology pending the main project starting, which we would hope to be as soon as possible. So this is a temporary solution to cover it up for now. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Steve. Member wish to speak? Board member? Comment? You're happy to move it, yeah? Thank you so much. I got no other hands up to speak anyway. No? So, okay, we can see the recommendation there is to approve. So we can, and don't forget, the conditions that have been added, plus those on page 113 there. So we can take that vote in.
Yeah,
when you're ready,
Councillor
please.
Meyer Baker,
For,
Peter Black,
4.
Phil Downing,
4.
Alan Jeffrey,
4.
Mary Jones,
4.
Mike Lewis,
4.
Nicola Matthews,
4.
Mike White,
4.
Andrew Williams,
4.
Paul Lloyd.
And 4.
Unanimous 10
Unanimous
for again.
again. Thank you very much.